Oopsie. I pressed the wrong button. Hello everybody. I started streaming and realized I hadn't even got my cues set up or my nice screen set up. So, oh well. My fault. Normally I have a nice pretty screen that says that we're starting the stream shortly, but we're not going to have that this evening. Welcome to Sunday Night Live, August 26th? Is that right? Yeah, August 26th, 2018. And who we got here? We have, I think we just got Bob here, and Bob T is here as well. Hang on a minute, I'm going to go over to the other screen like that. And yeah. I am a silly boy. Because I should have had a slightly different screen up than I do. I don't know why I don't have this screen, but it should be this one. And that's my fault. I'm such a pro at this. Bob says, Bob says, I was looking at a music book about this, the Wheel of Fifths, Circle of Fifths, yep. And it got really deep, really fast. What would you recommend to study, or could you present a downloadable video for purchase? Yeah, I am actually working on stuff like that. Yeah, I may as well come out of that screen now because you've all seen me, so so we may as well be back on this screen. Hello everybody. Yeah, I am actually working on some new content specifically aimed at music theory. Music theory for beginners, music theory for intermediates, and music theory for advanced people who have, who have maybe already studied some music theory to some degree. So, and fairly confident of some of the basic concepts of music theory. So I am working on that kind of stuff. That's very much in the works. It is going to take a wee bit of time before that kind of stuff unfolds. In the meantime, there's a lot of stuff out there in sheet music stores and in on the internet. There's a whole bunch of really, really great content. So you probably want to streamline your searching a little bit if you're just kind of looking for content online about music theory. So you probably want to be looking at music theory for beginners. So if you streamline your search a little bit to that kind of stuff. Circle of Fifths is actually quite a complicated concept to be starting with. You probably want to back up just a little bit to some more simple concepts. But like you say, the Circle of Fifths really does get a little bit complicated once you start digging deep into it, because not only you're talking about one circle, there are actually two. There's the Circle of Fifths around major keys, and then there's the relative minor Circle of Fifths as well. So there are two circles. You could say that the outer circle is the major keys, and then the inner circle is the minor keys. And then of course you have all sorts of related chords that fit between each of the major keys and then each of the minor keys, which we call a 2-5-1, which is I think I've talked about it before, where the chord 2 and the chord 5 leading to a chord 1 is a great way to change from one key to another. And it's much easier to change from major key to major key and minor key to major key. That's actually pretty easy, but it's a little bit more involved when you're changing from major to minor or minor to minor, because there are certain accidentals, certain notes that you have to have in order to make the change really, really smooth. But that's more kind of intermediate stuff. But anyway, I actually had, yeah, Bobby Booth said received a copy of the chord wheel yesterday. Cool. Yeah, I've seen a few people posting up this chord wheel thing. My granddad Tommy was an arranger professionally, and he had a similar kind of device where it was basically two circles, and you could maneuver once the outer circle and the inner circle, and basically his little circle was all about working out transpositions. So if he was writing for French horn, he needed to know how he needed to transpose for that instrument. So French horn is in F. So he would set the outer scale to C, and then the inner scale to F, and then he would move those. He had a little device that locked those two together, and then he would just move that circle around, and it would tell him straight away which key, whatever the concert key is, what key the French horn needs to be written in, and so on and so forth. So he had all of those transpositions worked out, and it made life very, very easy for Grandad Tommy in the early phase of his career as an arranger. But certainly, I think probably about 5-6 years into his career as an arranger in the 1930s, he was already kind of, he would just sit and write arrangements in a restaurant. He'd go to a restaurant and he'd order lunch and what have you, and he'd just sit and he'd just be writing. No reference points, no musical instruments, no nothing. It was all up here in his head. He could hear the arrangement in his head, and it would be as if he was transcribing and just writing down what he heard in his head. And then he, later that evening after dinner, he would take the charts to rehearsal with his big band that he ran, and he'd hand the charts out and they'd rehearse the arrangement. And then, that weekend the band would play that tune, and so that's how it went. So, but that's a whole nother story, kind of related. Anyway, so I had planned to start this show a little bit more slick and smooth than this, but it clearly hasn't happened. So anyway, I apologize. So I had some intro music lined up, because normally I start the show with some intro music, and it's usually a song of mine, but I was going to do something a little bit different, because I think I sent an email around to folks who are on my email list saying what we were going to focus on tonight. So if you're on my email list, you will have got this. Excuse me. But if you're not, get yourself on my email list, and then you're going to get all the heads up about what is going on in the life of Johnny Lipson Studios. And also content. You'll get the heads up on content before it goes out, so you'll know what to expect, particularly for my live streams. So tonight we're focusing on some drum loops provided by a company called Looploft. If you've never heard of Looploft, really they are fantastic. They have loops for just about everything under the sun. They started out just doing loops for drums, and they have since expanded their roster to include pedal steel guitar, saxophones. My good friend, one of my good friends, has done some woodwinds and saxophone loops. Bob Reynolds, he's a great guy. He plays tenor sax with Snarky Puppy, and he's done a whole bunch of tenor sax loops and flute and soprano sax loops for Looploft, and they are really, really good. And you get all sorts of terrific drum ones. There's Matt Chamberlain drums, which is what we're going to look at tonight. And then there's Nate Smith. Then there's Mark Juliana. There's a whole load of them. Plus, there's also a platinum bundle as well, which you can get for at the moment really, really cheap. It's you get loads and loads of drum loops, different styles. Different ways of playing the drums, different sticks, using mallets and brushes, and as well as sticks. It's very, very cool. And we could spend several shows just going through the library that I have from Looploft. I've got that platinum bundle. But just yesterday, I took a punt because Matt Chamberlain drums was on sale for $40. So I thought, I have to get this, because I love Matt Chamberlain's playing. He's a fantastic drummer. He's over the last sort of 20 to 25 years or so, has really made a big name for himself, and has been on hundreds of records as a session drummer. And I think I first came across him when he was playing with a keyboard player singer by the name of Ray Thistlethwaite. You may or may not have heard of him, also known as Sunray. And so Matt cropped up on some videos that they did where they videoed live as they were recording in the studio. And Matt's just a terrific drummer. And so I checked him out and had a listen to some of his performances on a whole bunch of records. And then I discovered that Looploft had made a set of loops with him, and I thought, I have to check these out. They are so good. And they really are. So I think we will have a little look at that, and then we'll get into your questions. And by the way, I heartily recommend you check out Matt Chamberlain and the set of loops he did with Looploft. He did 2 volumes. They are so cool. And I'll show you some of them tonight. So let's see. Steve Greenwood is here. He says, happy Sunday, everyone. Just Bob says, I assumed it would tell you what chords will work, but the talking points really confused me. Yeah, when you're dealing with cycle of fifths or circle of fifths or wheel of fifths, it's all about related keys more than anything else. Not necessarily about what chords work, because fundamentally there are what we would call primary and secondary chords that are in each key, major and minor. So it's a bit more involved than I can go to in just 15 seconds or 20 seconds or so. It would take a whole 9-hour series of videos to unpack kind of what I mean by primary and secondary chords and how they function in each of the major and minor keys, and then also how they relate to each other, and how you can also use chords from different keys, chords that don't belong to a particular key center, to create different colors and different tensions and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, these are things that are, as much as it's valuable to learn the theory and how they work and why they work and how these things are related to each other, there's no substitute for just sitting down at a piano or sitting down with your guitar and trying these things out and seeing what sounds good to your ear and what doesn't sound good. But, for some people, if I was to play this chord, to some people's ear, that would be ugly and unpleasant and, very, very tense, because it's not really a major chord, it's not really a minor chord, and it's not a diminished, and it's not an augmented chord. Well, it kind of is a little bit of an augmented chord, but it's, a lot of people would feel that that's very, very tense, and I suppose it is, because it doesn't have a major third in it, and it doesn't have a fifth. It has a seventh, a second or a ninth, and a sharp 11, and a 13th. So it is a 13th chord with a sharp 11th in it, but there's no third. I've taken the third out, so you don't have that major tonality identifying characteristic. So this kind of major relationship is gone, and instead we've got this instead, and to a lot of people that just sounds like it's just loaded with tension and is ugly and is harsh on the ears. Whereas for me, this is a thing of beauty, this particular chord. I love this sound, and you can move it around, and to me it sounds really beautiful, but to others it'd be really grating and harsh on your ear. How do you get from the one to the other? You get to the one from the one where it sounds harsh and unacceptable to your ear to the other by exposure, by spending time acclimatizing your ear to these kind of sounds, and eventually they become acceptable to you. And before you know it, you're listening to the music of Schoenberg, Olivier Messiaen, Berg, Webern, and those kind of classical composers who use those kind of chords all the time. So anyway, that's a bit of a long and involved answer, but it is very, very complicated. So you kind of, what you're talking about cycle of fifths and stuff is kind of at the intermediate, the upper band maybe of intermediate music theory, before you start getting into a whole bunch of other advanced stuff. So I hope that helps. That's really the best answer I can come up with, to be honest. Bobby Booth says, never could afford anything from Looploft. Well, you know, Looploft at the moment are running a lot of sales on their products. Like, as I say, the Matt Chamberlain Matt Chamberlain drums at the moment, the bundle with both volumes, so you get 2 volumes for the price of 1, essentially, is $40 at the moment. Cheap compared to what the full retail price should be. So they're running sales at the moment all the time. Let's see. Bobby said JL had put out a link of a music theory book. It's in a PDF form. Did I? I don't remember doing that. Really? Did I? Okay, if I did, I did. I don't remember doing it. Just Bob says, so you can take an off-colored chord that stands alone as bad, but how do you write in the coloring notes on different instruments to make it pleasing to the ear? Coloring notes, I'm not really sure what you mean there. Oh, it's the end of the month for you, says Bobby. Okay. Again, that's a complicated question that is going to take a long time to unpack, to be honest. But as I say, I am planning to do a bunch of videos that will deal with questions like those. So you just need to hang fire and be a little bit patient whilst I do those. But I am going to do them. And book from Hong Kong. I have no idea what that means, Bobby. Yeah, so I am intending to do a bunch of videos that unpack questions just like that. How do I make something that kind of stands out on its own sound good? And it's all to do with context, fundamentally. That's the bottom line, is, you know, a chord like that on its own sounds weird. But if you set it in context like this, now that it's set in context, it doesn't sound quite so odd, because there's chords before it, there's chords that follow it. It now makes sense. It's like, you know, if I was just to suddenly say lettuce. Okay, what do I mean by lettuce? Obviously, I'm describing, you know, a vegetable. That's, you know, it's a vegetable. But in the context of what we're talking about here, that doesn't make sense. You know, we're talking about chords, we're talking about chord tones and everything else, and I just say lettuce or jelly babies or, you know, anything like that. It doesn't make sense. So context will tell you whether it makes sense. Your ear will fill in the gaps, because your ear is very clever. Anyway, let's get to hey Woodbeast, you're here. Good to see you, mate. He says greetings. Let's get to the main meat and veg of tonight, because I wanted to look at Matt Chamberlain drums, seeing as we're talking about it a bit. So I think we should do that. So I'm going to go over to this screen here. And now you should see Studio One. And I've created this little groove just before showtime, which is why I was maybe a couple of minutes late, because I was finishing this up and struggling to get a melody going for this. And this will basically show you just how cool Matt Chamberlain drums is, and how good the quality of the sounds are, and the loops that you get. So I've just picked out maybe 2, maybe 3 different loops and put them together so that they make sense. And they sound fabulous. I'm really, really impressed with this. And we can go into and have a look at some of the other ones that you get as well. But so I've added some bass and some Fender Rhodes, and I've used the VG Sparkle as well, if you've seen that. Just a while back, PreSonus were running a deal with UJAM, the people that make Virtual Guitarist, so you could get Sparkle for free. And I jumped on it, it's a freebie. Why the heck not? So, so I jumped on that and I went and got it. And this is actually my first time of using it. I've had it for a wee while and not had a chance to use it. But now I'm actually using it in this session here. And it actually sounds pretty good. It takes a little bit of getting to grips with and working out how it works and what chords it can play and what chords it cannot play. Once you work those things out, what chords? I mean chord types. What chord types it can play and what chord types it doesn't understand at all. And once you work that out, then you're well away, as I am tonight. So here we go. I've got this little loop. Lorenz is here. He says happy Sunday. Good to see you, Lorenz. Bobby Booth says send me an email so I can send you MP3 of what I got. Okay, cool. So you are talking to Beast. That's awesome. Great. Glad you guys are all chatting. Okay, so I'm going to play this little loop that I came up with. It's only 8 bars, and this just showcases Matt Chamberlain's awesome drumming. All right, so have a listen to this. Alrighty, so there you go. I knocked that up in about 10 minutes before showtime. And the bit that I was having trouble with was the melody. I was tripping over myself a little bit to make it sound cool. But anyway, this is what I got. And I hope you like it. But just check out how good these drums sound. They sound ridiculous. They sound absolutely epic, and they're really beautifully recorded. And I'm trying to remember the studios that they were recorded in. But they basically set up about 3, I think, of Matt's personal drum sets in their studio with different cymbal configurations. He has a Gretsch kit, he has a Ludwig kit, and then he has a set of 1939, I think, Slingerland Radio Kings, which sound absolutely gorgeous. And then he had a Trixon drum set as well. If you've never heard of Trixon drums, they were the drum company back in the late 60s, early 70s that experimented with weirdly shaped drums. So you may or may not have ever seen a picture of a drum set with a kick drum that looks like someone really, really heavy has sat on it, or an elephant has stood on it, and it's kind of squished, and it's a little bit kind of, instead of being round like a normal kick drum would be, it's kind of like egg-shaped instead. If you were to put an egg on its side, that's kind of how it looked. And so Trixon basically experimented with this, and they actually had some relatively high-profile endorsers that they worked with, and I think the drummer with Bill Haley in the Comets was one of those who endorsed this drum set. But anyway, they sound really, really good, Trixon drums. They're actually quite high-pitched and quite sharp-sounding drums. But they recorded Matt's 1960s Ludwig kit, his 1970s Gretsch kit, and as I say, the 30s Slingerland Radio Kings, and that's my bass trap falling off yet again. It does this pretty much every day. I have a bass trap over in this corner. You can't see because I'm on the Studio One screen. On the left corner, as I'm looking at it, and it falls off pretty much every day. I just can't get it to stay on the wall. It's very annoying. So I have to every day pretty much put it up. So, but I'm going to leave that just for now. But yes, so they recorded about 3 different of his drum sets, and let's take a look actually at what you get. So the loops that I used in this little piece here are all taken from this folder called Rock Roll, and they're really quite funky. And there's all sorts of different loops, and pretty much all of the styles they're grouped in this way. So you've got different chorus patterns, different fills, some funky patterns, intro, a rides pattern, some various tom grooves, and then verses. So let's take some of these and we'll play just a few of these. See what I mean? So some of them have a little fill at the end, some of them don't. So there's lots of different ideas here. Some of these tom ones are really cool. You know, in certain circumstances, I might actually use these for a verse. Try this one. So yeah, there's pretty cool ones, and then you've got ride ones as well. That one's got a fill at the end. Yeah, these are all really funky ones. But there's a whole bunch in different styles, different tempos, like abstract linear. These are really quite good as well. Some of them use little bits of percussion and stuff that he's got, all sorts of things that he hits, bells and all sorts. But yeah, let's check out some of these. So these are all really cool. Yeah, I like those linear ones. And then you got Tom Attack. I've not actually tried any of these. That's quite cool. Just played on the ride cymbal. Let's try this one. Nice. Interesting. So, you know, there's a whole bunch here that you could find incredibly useful at any time. Let's see. Cinematic mallets. You've got drums and percussion in this one here. And this one just builds very slowly. little floor tom roll. So that's great for kind of like film score type stuff. And then there's Swankin Pockets. Now this one is very, very cool. These are really, really funky, and they're kind of in that kind of grey area between straight 16 or straight 8s and triplets, and they're kind of in between. So which, you know, is quite often referred to as swunk, kind of swung but straight at the same time, kind of in between. These are really good. I've tried some of these out earlier. Let's try this one. Very, very cool. Lots of very, very cool stuff there. And the cool thing about this is you get the audio loops, and you also get a bunch of MIDI loops. So if you decide that, you know, actually there's not enough variation of drum sounds here, you can take what Matt has played and you can actually use a different drum set for it. So you get all of the MIDI loops as well, and you get some samples. So you get a Craviotto kit and a Ludwig kit, and then you get some effects ones as well, which is cool. And that pretty much sums up what you get in the two bundles. There's a deluxe version as well that you can get that gives you the multi-tracks. So this one really is just stereo files and MIDI files. You don't get the whole drum set, unfortunately. You have to get the deluxe version, which is a little bit more expensive, but well worth getting if you like the sound of these and you think, hey, I could use these in my songs, but I would like to have a little bit more control over EQ of the snare drum, EQ of the kick drum, and that kind of stuff. You can get the deluxe version that has pretty much all the file types you could ask for. It has the stereo WAVs, it has MIDI, it has Rex, and it also has the multitracks as well. The thing to note about the multitrack files is that they are at 96K. So if you're using sessions that are in 44.1 or 48, you would need to convert the 96 down to 44.1 or 48 sample rate. All right, so I hope that that has been of interest to you. I certainly have been enjoying using these, and we can play a little bit more of these later if we have time at the end of the show. We've got about half an hour left, so I figure maybe now is probably a good time to get to any questions you've got. They can either be questions about Looploft, about this specific bundle, the Matt Chamberlain bundle, or we can talk about anything that you guys have got going on mixing wise, songwriting wise, mastering, arranging, instrumentation, orchestration, whatever it is that you guys have got going on. We can talk about that. So I'm going to just take a look over in the chat and see what we've got. Woodbeast asks, what is Looploft's rules on copyright to use? Yes, that's a good question. All of these are 100% copyright free, so they are royalty free, so you can use them. I mean, I don't really see the point of a loop package that you can't use. If you follow me. I mean, to me it doesn't make sense that you purchase a loops bundle, a loops package, which you pay for, but then you have to pay again for a royalty for using them. That doesn't make sense to me, and I think that would be bad business. I think the only way that that would work is if the loop bundle was free in the first instance. So if it's free to download and free for you to have in Studio One, but then you had to pay a license for their use within your song. So a certain percentage of your song royalties go to whoever the loop manufacturer is. That would make sense, but it doesn't make sense if you're paying for the bundle to start with and then having to, you know, pay out a royalty. So they're all 100% completely free to use. You don't have to pay anything more than the price you pay at the checkout to get the bundle. And as far as I know, that is how Looploft works. So Bobby says, I'll check them out the first of the month. Woodby says, I'll just look them up. But that is a great question. Absolutely. Just Bob says, first time I've heard the Looploft spotlighted. Really cool. Yeah, they are actually. And I've got quite a few Looploft stuff actually. If I just close my Matt Chamberlain set for a minute, I've got some pop loops here in all sorts of tempos and all sorts of styles. They're a little bit harder to follow, these ones, but they sound just as good. Actually, you can't see these because brain, I'm not on Studio One and I need to be back over on this screen. So you guys can't see these, but you can now. But I've got I've got pop, I've got odd metered ones, I've got rock ones, world percussion, I've got world ones. I mean, this is all of the loops you get from the Platinum bundle, which is pretty much everything that they do drums wise, apart from the artist bundles, like the Nate Smith ones. I don't have those. I would love to get those. I need to wait for sales for those though. But I'll play you this little loop here. See what I mean? They're very cool. So I've got quite a lot of these in different styles. We could have a look at this one. There you got that classic reversed reverb, reverse gated reverb from the 1980s. Yep, so lots of very cool ones there. Some jazz ones which are really good as well. So you got these really fast ones. These are great. So yeah, loads of different styles and loads of different tempos and all sorts. You got brushes here, you got blues, you got dry drums. These are great if you want just really dry sounding drums. You got Atomikit, you've got Gretsch, you've got Ludwig, you've got, yeah, these are all really quite nice. And I have used these, I think, on songs. Let's try this one. So, and they're all performed really well by, I don't know, some unnamed session musician. But there you go. So I hope that has been of value. And we're back over here now. Wibby says, I agree. I just wrote a song for my friend and he played it on his YouTube channel. And they hit him with copyright strike from BMI. Well, that would only happen if what is contained in that song is something that, because basically the way that copyright strike work on YouTube in general is that they have an algorithm that detects. It's got a whole library of recognizable songs and material, and if it detects something that matches that, then it automatically generates a copyright strike against you, and you can appeal it if you can prove that you've got written permission from whomever it might be, or that the sample that you've used is 100% royalty free, and if you provide sufficient evidence, they can revoke that strike and you're back to normal. So that's kind of how it works. But if you've written a song where you've used a loop or a sample that is not royalty free and is not copyright free, then you are going to have to basically be able to provide for that. And you can, if it's going to feature in a YouTube video, like let's say you make a music video and you're using a sample from say an old Motown record, for example, then you just need to make sure that in the description of the video that you credit where you got that sample from, and state that you've sought written permission from the original copyright owner of that record, and you should be okay, and they shouldn't strike you for copyright. But yeah, those kind of things are worth pursuing. Woodby says, I used a few loops from Looploft. Just Bob says, is it subscription based or you bought to own? Yeah, you purchased them. You actually purchased them from Looploft. I'm not sure whether there is any kind of subscription model for Looploft or not. Don't know. But certainly these ones that I have here, I purchased. And so I actually own these. Just Bob says, I asked earlier, are all the drum loops recorded at the same pitch? If so, can you change the pitch of the drums to match your sound? Yes, of course you can. In Studio One, in the inspector, you can pitch anything up or down, however you want. But I mean, these are all different drum sets, recorded in different ways using different recording techniques. So the dry drum ones are very, very dry, almost like they've put towels over the drums to make them sound as dry as possible. Which is a technique you may or may not want in your particular song. And some of them, the snare drum is pitched really low. Now, because these ones that I have here, these are all the stereo WAVs, you can, for each of these bundles here, get the multitrack versions, the multitrack deluxe versions of each one of these. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can certainly get them, and then you could just isolate the snare drum and pitch it up if you want to. There's not really a way to do that just with the stereo WAVs, although you could be creative and make several duplications of your drum loop, and then using EQ, high pass and low pass filters, isolate the snare drum in that way, and then pitch that up if that's what you want. You could certainly do it that way. But that really, if you're only dealing with stereo WAVs, that's your only other option. Let's see. Greg is here. Hello, Greg. Good to see you. He says, I know it's a pain, but isn't that algorithm kind of a good thing if you are putting your music out there? Yes. So people don't steal it or copy it. Maybe I don't understand how it works. Yeah, I think the copyright system for YouTube is a good thing. It prevents people using other people's work without their permission. And if you're the person whose work is being used without permission and you're not getting paid for somebody else using your work, or using an extract of your work without your permission, then, that's a good thing, because then it means you can pursue that and you can make sure that you get your due credit or your due royalties, which you are legally entitled to. So it is actually a good thing. It's only a bad thing if you're the one whose song ends up getting removed for a copyright issue, because it means you then have to re-upload it. However, if if you think that they have wrongly removed your video on grounds of copyright breach, and you think you've got a good case, then appeal it. Absolutely appeal it. Don't just say, hey, they removed my video, that's a bummer. No, appeal it. And there is a process that you can go through, and if that happens to you, there are links to follow in YouTube. YouTube email you, and they will tell you why you got a copyright strike, and then there's a link there in that email that you can click on, and it'll take you to an appeals form, and you can provide all of your evidence there to show that actually I used Looploft loops and they are totally royalty free, and then they should go, okay, that's fine, we will remove your copyright strike, and on you go, re-upload your video. YouTube are actually pretty fair. It's only unfair if you're the one, I'm not saying anybody is doing it here, but it's only unfair if you're the one who is just using other people's work without permission. And actually, I think it's, you might feel hard done by, but at the end of the day, people who create content and create bodies of work like loops and that kind of stuff, they deserve their credit, because it costs money for them to make such things. So, but I think just about everybody knows where I stand on copyright and piracy and that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty clear on it, by and largely. Greg says, thanks for answering that. I have heard lots of complaining about stuff being removed. That would suck. Yeah, it's only I think a lot of people that complain on YouTube about being struck for copyright are people that are complaining because they're using other people's work without permission. There are exceptions. Ian Shepherd, my good friend, the mastering engineer, he's a great guy, and when he does some of his, or certainly has done, when he's done live streams looking at a particular aspect of mastering, and he's played an extract of a song that he's been working on, or a song that he isn't mastering live, those videos have been struck for copyright as well, even though he's got the permission from the artist to use their song on his show. So Ian has to be very careful, and Ian has to be able to then go to YouTube and say, well, no, actually I've got permission, and here is the permission. So he has had his copyright issues and has dealt with them with YouTube. And it can be a pain in the butt if you are trying to genuinely do something that's educational, like I am, which is why by and largely myself and Joe Gilder and Graham Cochran and others, we primarily use our own work, our own body of work. Not because we're wanting to promote ourselves, but because it's the simplest and easiest way to get round all of those copyright issues with YouTube, because it's our work. So, we're not going to sue ourselves for copyright violation. So, it's the easiest way to get around it. Although, quite often, if I want to teach something like parallel compression, I'll talk to my clients and I'll say, would you be okay if I used X song where we used a lot of parallel compression? Would you be okay if I used that song on a video? And by and large, they say, yeah, great, that's fine. Because, at the end of the day, it gets their song out on the internet, out onto YouTube. And usually they're fairly happy with that. They maybe don't like it if kind of like the work is still in progress and it's not a completed production yet. They usually prefer me to wait until the song has been released commercially. before I use their work, or they'll just say, yeah, that's fine, but just don't use the vocal until the song is released, and I'm totally cool with that. And Just Bob has donated £2, $2 even, which is not £2. $2 is not £2. $2 is about £1.84, I think. Greg says, oh wow, I didn't think about that. Yep. And Woodby says, oh, I see. So because he played the song I wrote live on his channel during a live stream, that caused the problem. I'm not entirely sure. It depends upon what the content specifically was of your song. You know, did you include a sample of a well-known work? Maybe. I don't know. I've not heard the song. I don't know the context. And that's kind of going to be the problem for me answering this particular question, Woodbeast, is that I don't know the context, unfortunately. So, yeah. So if it's a copyright strike by BMI, then, you know, that suggests to me that maybe one of their artists' work was used in your song. But as I say, I don't know, because, you know, I've not heard the song. Mike Neighbor says, educational purposes are a different story, I thought. To a degree, that is true. There is what they call fair use. And there's a particular legal document in the on the statute, but it's applicable in the United States. There's a different one for the UK, and there's a different one for Europe. But you are only allowed to use a certain portion of a recorded work, and it has to be within a justifiable educational context. Like, for example, if I was writing a paper on a particular subject, let's say I'm writing a paper on Schoenberg's 12-tone system. And, you know, so obviously I'm writing about Schoenberg's 12-tone system. And so because I want to write about that, I need to be able to cite from his personal sources how he arrived at this 12-note system and this 12-tone system and what the rules are governing it. So I want to cite the guy directly, you know, what he said. This is how this works. This is how I have designed this particular approach, compositional approach to work. So I would cite him, but I can't cite more than, I think, 2 paragraphs of any particular document that is owned by his estate, I believe it is. So if I want to copy more, if I want to use more in my paper, then I have to write to the owner of his copyright, which is his estate. So I have to send a letter to the Schoenberg estate, and the Schoenberg estate will say, yes, you can do that for this paper. That's fine because it's, you know, for X, Y, and Z. But they might not. They might say, no, sorry, we can't allow you to use that much. And I'd have to maybe agree to a shorter amount of citation. And so it is the same with kind of like using an extract from a song in a YouTube video, or an extract of a film, like a James Bond film, for example. You know, let's say you want to use an extract of Tomorrow Never Dies to illustrate how, I don't know, to illustrate a particular way in which the film score, the music, kind of helps to communicate the story in that particular scene. You would have to write to the owner of the film, which I think is MGM. I think it's MGM that own the Bond films. You'd have to write to them, and you'd have to ask permission to use this particular scene from this particular Bond film, and then you'd have to show why you want to use that particular scene in your video and what you're trying to communicate. And then you'd, of course, in your YouTube video, you have to directly credit MGM and all of that. So that's kind of how it works. And it's complicated and it's annoying, but, you know, it's It means that everybody's protected at the end of the day. And I'd rather have everybody's work protected than nobody's work protected. Let's see. Yeah, there's... Hang on. I need to scroll up the chat because I'm missing half of it. Just Bob says, sorry, it couldn't be more, kind of poor right now. Just Bob, don't worry about it. You know, every cent, every halfpenny is important to me. You know, however much anybody chooses to donate, the fact that you've actually chosen to donate something, anything, is very cool. And I'm very appreciative of every cent that anybody sends me. Just because they like what I'm doing. That's great. It's more, to me, it's the heart that's more important, and the intent that's more important. That has more value to me than, you know, whether you gave 50 cents or $50. You know, the monetary value is less relevant than your intent and your motive. And your motive is generous. Your motive is good, and you're just wanting to tip your hat to me, and that's great. I love that. So if anybody else wants to do that, go ahead. It's cool. It doesn't matter what monetary value you choose. It's up to you. And if you don't want to, that's also cool. There's no pressure to do anything here. Mike Neighbor says, if you aren't trying to monetize or advertise your business, it's okay. That's what I've been told. Yeah, if you're monetizing your video on YouTube and you're wanting to include copyright material, you kind of have to do both. You have to make sure that you get the proper permissions, but you also have to switch off monetizing for that video unless you are going to share the monetizing with the producer of the and the owner of the work which you are referring to or citing or playing in your video. That's kind of how it works. Let's go back down a bit. And let's see. Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, Bobby Booth has just donated $2 as well. Thank you, buddy. And Avast wants me to update, which I'm not going to do. Not in the middle of a show, I'm not. How much is the upgrade? Woodby says, how much is the upgrade to the drum kit you reviewed? Oh, do you mean the Loop Loft bundles that I got? Other than that, I'm not really sure what you're referring to. Just Bob says, I don't agree with sampling, but you can't get away from it anymore with today's music. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sampling crops up in just about every style of music. It used to, for a long time, just be the domain of hip-hop producers. But nowadays, everybody is sampling something or someone for a particular artistic reason. Now, if it's only like a 2-second snippet of something, I don't see why anybody would quibble over that. I certainly wouldn't. If somebody took a 2-second sample off of one of my songs and used that in their work, if they used it in a really creative way for good, then I'm not going to object. It's like Steely Dan when I forget the hip hop artist that recorded Uptown Baby. I can't remember his name. His name has just left my head. But this particular artist and producer approached Walter and Donald, wrote them an email and said, look, you know, this is what I want to do with this, with your intro to the song Black Cow, because I really loved that intro. It's so funky, and I'd really like to use that kind of like as the foundational beat for this particular song. And at first, Donald and Walter refused, but then he said, look, I'll demonstrate it. So he demonstrated to them what he wanted to do. And actually, Donald and Walter said, actually, this is really cool. This is actually just really cool and really creative, and they were really impressed with it. So they said they gave him permission to do it. Uptown Baby became actually quite a large hit, quite successful. And Walter and Donald, of course, got royalties from the sales because of the use of Black Cow. So Black Cow kind of made them money again, and also brought the song back into people's attention. So people then went and bought the original record that Black Cow is on, which is the Asia album. And so it worked out favorably for everybody. But there are examples where that doesn't really work, and artists can get really peed off, and they can end up in lengthy lawsuits and such like. So Mike says you can sample, you do need the artist you're sampling permission. That is correct. Yes, absolutely correct. And unfortunately, there's a lot of young producers out there that just can't be bothered with that. They just think, that takes up time, and it's gonna mess with my mojo, my workflow, and all of that. Absolute bollards, frankly. Bit of rhyming slang there. It's nonsense. If you're the hip hop artist and somebody samples your rapping, but then has exactly the same attitude and says, I can't be bothered to, it's just effort to make contact with the original, and then they use your work, you're not going to be very happy. So anyway, I think we've labored that point enough. Just Bob says, but most artists, if you can call them that, don't ask, they take. Yes, that's absolutely right. There's a lot of that goes on. Greg says, that's cool. You'd be open to sharing a snippet of your work. Yeah, I think before it goes live, so to speak, or before it goes out to the public domain, I would want to hear how, that little 2, 3, 4, 5 second snippet of my work is being used. And if it's being used in a good way, and if it's being used creatively for a positive reason, then I might actually be agreeable. And we'd strike up some terms like, yes, but you need to credit me and link to the record where you got the sample from. And that we might come to that kind of agreement. And I might say, and I'll take 1%, a 1% cut of your sales as well. It depends on how it's being used, and it depends what it's being used for, to be honest. John Anderson with the $9.99 donation. And he says, came across Circle of Fifths the other day on Chords, thought Obi-Wan. Thoughts Obi-Wan, he says. I wish I was Obi-Wan. Rick Beato is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of music theory. Absolutely. He is the Jedi Master, and I'm just the Padawan, to be honest. He knows far more than I will ever know, and I have a degree in this subject. So, yeah, he is awesome. It would be says, would that include the toilet paper song? Well, the toilet paper song hasn't really been written. It was improvised for a Johnny Gibe show, for one of his live streams, and I think we only did like a verse of it. I don't think we did very much else. I think we kept on saying we would finish the song, but I don't know. It was kind of one of those songs that was improv in the moment, so after the fact, it's probably not so funny. But yeah, thank you, John, for your donation. That's very generous. I appreciate that. And one of my thoughts on the Circle of Fifths, you can't live without it. And whether you like it or not, you are referring to the Circle of Fifths in any piece of music that you write. But you can actually, you can create songs out of it. Like you could go, let's see. And those are the chord changes to Pachelbel's Canon. If you've ever heard of that. And there's lots of songs that are based around the chord changes to Pachelbel's canon. Go West by the Pet Shop Boys is one of those. It's a hideous song. Although some of you out there might really like it, I don't. I think it's a hideous song, but but yeah, essentially it's you know. And you know, there's been lots and lots of songs written around those chord changes, and those invoke that kind of thing, you know. C being 1, G being 5, and then 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5, all in the key of C. So C being 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And that's how you derive all of those kind of things. So the cycle of fifths be C. I mean, there are cycles of fourths and cycles of fifths. Cycle of fourths, we go C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, E, A, D, G, C, and then you back round to the beginning again. So yeah, so they're really, really important, especially for getting from one key to another. Cycle of fifths. Because they're all related, and if you can move between related key centers smoothly, quickly, and easily, you can create very, very powerful music. Just Bob says, but the toilet paper song is immortalized on digital YouTube. Yeah, I guess it kind of is, isn't it? How much is the upgrade to Loop Loft drums you need? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Woodbeast. How much is the upgrade to the Loop Loft drums you need? To get the deluxe version of the Matt Chamberlain drums, I'm not sure. To get them, to get the Rex and multi-tracks, I'm not sure. I probably need to look it up. I tell you what, Woodbeast, I'll look it up and I'll drop you an email and let you know how much it is if you're interested. Because they are certainly very, very cool. And it gives you a lot of control. You can basically have Matt's drum mix in your song, and then you can mix the whole song, including the drums. Because at the moment, I would treat this like a drum bus, to be honest. This stereo file here, I would treat this as a drum bus in the context of this tune, and just balance everything and EQ everything accordingly. Just doing broad EQ, and that would work because, you know, these stereo WAV files, they have been EQ'd and compressed a little bit on the way in, and they've gone through a console and a tape machine. So there's a degree to which the stereo WAVs have already been processed, and I think you get the same with the multi-tracks as well. There's a degree to which there is some processing that's already been done. But you know, like was asked earlier, can I change the pitch of the snare drum? You can with the multi-tracks. You cannot really with the stereo WAVs. So Woodbeast says, I'll hook you up. Well, that's very kind. That's very generous of you. Thank you very much, mate. I really do appreciate that a great deal. And Mike says that Matt Chamberlain is an amazing drummer. He certainly is. And he's a thoroughly nice guy. I've seen him interviewed. And he really is extremely kind, generous, nice bloke. And generous with his time and his thoughts on a whole range of subjects as a session musician and recording artist like he is. But yeah, he's got a ton of chops. He really does. And he plays in this really nice, fluid, relaxed style where nothing is trouble. Nothing is too hard for him. Nothing is, I'm not saying, you know, I mean, he's got a whole array of chops. He can play phenomenal things, incredibly fast. But he plays everything in an incredibly relaxed style, which is really, really very pleasing on the eye to watch when you watch him work. But the results that you get from a recording point of view mean, you know, because he plays so relaxed, then that's how it goes down to tape, and you end up with something that is relaxed, that's chilled, and yet focused and kind of, you know, snappy and funky. You know, whatever style of music he's playing, it's always funky. Even if he's playing like a waltz, you know, he still has this way to make it just utterly groovy. Anyway, folks, we are at 1:10 in the morning here in Edinburgh in Scotland, and it's been a very, very wet day here, and I've not been feeling very well, so I have been indoors for the day, and now my wife is not very well as well, so she is tucked up in bed, and I need to go and attend to her. Woodley says, anyone here using eJamming to jam live yet? No, I haven't actually come across that yet, I have to admit. Mike Neighbor says, very humble and down to earth. Yeah, he most certainly is. Alright, folks, I'm going to wrap the show here, and I'm going to say a very big thank you to everybody for coming out to the show. And thank you very much for your great questions and your comments. And if you're interested in the Matt Chamberlain bundle, go get it now, whilst it is for $40 for the stereo WAV and MIDI files. Because I think they're just as valuable. You could go and get the deluxe package and get the multi-tracks, if you've got the budget for that. But certainly if you've got a spare $40 lying about, get these stereo files, because they are really, really outstanding, and they will make your songs kick buttocks, most definitely. All right, folks, I will see you on Songwriting Simplified over at Johnny Gibe's channel on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time, and until then, I will bid you all a very good night. Bye for now.